Hey everybody, I'm Kelly Fuge. Welcome back. Thank you for watching these. I decided to make this video because I've been fretting a lot about the tone of maybe the last videos that I put out, the first ones. And I know I'm getting used to this and everything, but I was worried that I was getting a little bit resentful. And that's going to be the theme of this video, is that as individuals, the main way we stop the tyrants, the onset of tyranny in the world, is by basically examining the resentment in our own hearts and figuring out why that is, and figuring out what we as an individual can do about that, rather than then becoming resentful and then trying to control other people, which is basically what the tyrants of the world are doing, because they don't have any joy in their lives, and ultimately they hate themselves, and so they're trying to control everyone else. So thank you everyone for, if you made it through those videos, and I'm going to try and sort of fix my tone a little bit, because I'm not become resentful at all of you who are actually paying attention to this. Even if you disagree with me, we got to work together is my point. So I wrote resentment leads to evil, right? That's what I was just talking about. And well, yeah, I'm just going to jump right into it. I'd say resentment and self-hatred was the main emotion driving all the communist tyrants of all the communist regimes. I mean, they were all over the world. It wasn't just the Soviet Union. And I want to emphasize a little, well, not even a little, more seriously, that communism is evil. Collectivism is evil. The idea that everyone has to be a little automaton and act exactly the same, and I don't care what your reasoning for doing it is. Like I said in the first video, you as an individual are the one who helps your community. You don't get to vote for a tyrant to take more money from everyone, to basically just waste is what they actually do, even though they say they're helping people with it, So that's evil, right? Like trying to control other people for your own egoic reasons of trying to be the most ruthless tyrant, like A.K.A Stalin, Lenin, right? Mao, that's evil. They were evil people. Okay, so I'm serious about that, and I'm trying to be as serious about that as possible. I'm not trying to make any kind of joke about that, And that's what really concerns me, and that's where I was going when I was talking about, in that first video, when I was talking about the ideologies and beliefs that have been decided for you in college. And of course, the collectivists and the communists who, one world government, they're trying to make the whole thing controlled by basically fewer and fewer people, but ultimately they're trying to make us all control each other. And I'm going to get to the books that I'm going to reference at the end of this, but basically what happened was that people just ignored, and during communism, and I'll use the Soviet Union as the main example because that's what I've, read the most about, I guess. I haven't even read the most about it, but that's what all these books reference anyway, that I'm going to show you guys. And of course, I've got 1984 right here, which, shout out to my middle school advanced language arts teacher who had us read that book. And it had an effect on me for the rest of my life. The main character, he sort of realizes that the whole thing is a setup. But at that point, everyone has been too cowardly and silent about it. And this other book that I'm going to get into, The Gulag Archipelago, which I've only read the first couple chapters, but I'm going to keep reading it. The Gulag Archipelago. An archipelago refers to a chain of islands, basically. It refers to the series or the yeah, of basically prison and death camps that they, you know, basically put almost the entire population in. I mean, of all the communist regimes combined, 94 million people, and I'm sure more actually, you know, were murdered at these places. They were either worked to death or starved to death or just shot, you know, women and children. Like, they didn't discriminate, you know? And in the first part of the book, he gets into how it all began, and that is that people were so cowardly about this tyrant starting to take over and saying, well, if you're not part of the Communist Party or you don't agree with the government, we're just going to arrest you. And really, they didn't even care about that. They just would just arrest anybody, because it was about putting so much fear into everyone that people would basically turn each other in, you know? And that's why George Orwell wrote 1984 about the Soviet Union, you know? So for everyone who is a big skeptic about this, like, that's the point I want to make. And well, I went back and I rewatched those videos and I made a lot of good points, but I might have lost a lot of people, okay? And I might have done that by having this sort of resentful tone. And that's not what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to kind of correct that and just show everyone that, hey, I'm taking full-on personal responsibility for my life. That's the point. Like, I'm not trying to drag anyone, you know, into anything, right? Like, this is all about freedom and not trying to control other people. So I recognized with the story about Tyler that I was telling you guys about, you know, how I was trying to manipulate and control him. I recognized that in myself, that control, right? And I think what happens is people get so cowardly about facing that in themselves, and that's why you get something like 94 million people being murdered because no one stands up against the tyrants, you know, because they're so afraid of really looking at their own dark side and realizing, like, I have that capability to be a tyrant like that. And also it's the same scenario with the bullies that we all have seen in our lives probably. Is like when someone's getting bullied, people don't want to become the target of the bully, so they don't stand up. Okay, so I wrote communism equals control, right? You have, okay, I was like, I'm in my little neighborhood right now. Communism equals control. You have like the top dogs, basically, like the most ruthless guys, you know, and then everyone else is either throwing each other under the bus to maintain the position that they have. Everyone's just trying to control each other, basically, to not, you know, I guess to not get killed, or to just kind of like, and you know what? This is what we saw during COVID, and I'm going to get into why that's the case, but COVID was not about individualism at all. If you think it is, you're lying to yourself. It was about collectivism. It was about communism, which that kind of leads into this. So I just, I'm going to link this interview. Well, it's a 6-minute clip of this interview in 1984 of this man named Yuri Bezmenov, and he was an ex-KGB officer, you know, who was working for the Soviet Union, who was part of the higher-ups in the Soviet Union, and he was a part of the Novosti, they called it, which is the press arm, basically, like the media, or, you know, like the propaganda, basically. And so he defected in, I wrote the notes on my arm. He defected in 1970, he came to the West, because obviously he grew disgusted with what was going on. And so I was just talking about COVID, right, and how it's communism. Well, this agenda to basically turn the freest place in the world, which is America, still has always been and still is the most free place in the world. So again, when I talk about money, I'm not trying to put down capitalism or free market. Like, if we have more of that, like, truly, if we had that truly, which, you know, we kind of do, but it's getting more and more controlled. But the more freedom we all have to, you know, exchange with each other, like, the more people actually have to rely on their own merit. It's a meritocracy, right? In order to get by in the world. Like, the more people don't become resentful and then just want the tyrants to take care of them and force other people to pay their way, like welfare and everything that you see, right? And obviously, I'm not trying to talk bad about, homeless people or people in bad situations that live on welfare or whatever, but the thing is, like, we all have to learn how to deal with the consequences of our own actions, and for sure, welfare doesn't allow that, So, he talked about how this has been, the agenda to take down America, the freest place in the world, has been, on the agenda forever, And it's not like it was just the communists. It's like there are secret networks of people, secret to the public. I mean, it is really, like, if you do any kind of digging, it's really obvious, actually. But, it's covert slavery. It's not overt, but there are networks of people, and there have always been for all of human history. You hear people talk about the Illuminati, Council of Foreign Relations, or some of these groups of people, and you have all these different groups that are intertwined together. You have, obviously, like, there's the World Economic Forum, there's the World Health Organization, there's the UN, right? There's NATO, like, but these they're basically all these clubs, and they kind of, in cliques of people, right, that are all, they're all vying for control of the population and influence and everything, but they're also working together. And I'm going to get into that in the end when I talk about these books. Like, none dare call it conspiracy is, I'll just show you guys right now. He talks about how, like, I'm going to read from it at the end, but that, the Democrats and the Republicans, it's just two sides of the same coin. Of course, these people have their infighting and stuff, but they generally work together. And the reason the book is titled None Dare Call It Conspiracy is people have this idea that, oh, the government is just a bunch of incompetent people. It's like, yeah, at the lower levels, sure, they're just trying to get their little piece of the pie, and they're just kind of going along with the herd and not really asking questions because they get their comfy life out of it, like low-level politicians, right? But people at the higher levels, like with the most influence and control, like, it's all a conspiracy. It just means they're working together. That's what a conspiracy is. When you conspire with someone, you're working together with them to do something. In this case, underhanded. They're doing something underhanded, which is making us think that we actually have a choice, and we don't. They're like, here, vote for this guy, vote for that guy. You have a choice. You actually don't. So, okay, I want to talk about, I wrote my last week, experiencing my own independence. I left my previous job, which was awesome. And obviously, that job was a meritocracy. Like, I wouldn't have been able to make it in that job for 5 years if I hadn't been a hard worker, if I hadn't been self-motivated, if I hadn't been an individual, right? Like, you got to think for yourself. A good boss doesn't want someone who's just gonna be like, oh, like, not try. Like, I'm a hustler, man. I get out there and I give it my best, But, like, so all that is to say, that job was great, and that does represent, like, that job gave me a sense of self-respect. And what's kind of funny about that is, I explained this to the guys when I told them I was leaving. I said, I noticed myself getting kind of resentful because I'm not really thinking for myself that much anymore, because I didn't really have any skin in the game. I did, but, like, I was the only employee in that company. Like, they were all independent contractors with their own tools and everything. So, like, this last week, and what's made me realize that I want to take out this resentful tone towards people listening, like, I'm not that kind of person. And every time I see that in myself, I'm going to recognize it and call it out and say, hey, I'm not going that way. Sorry, guys. And Anyway, I experienced my own independence this week because I left that job. I started working with these 2 women gardening part-time who are very independent women running their own business. You know, it's awesome. And so now I have time to find my own work on the side. And that has been excellent. Like, I've really been enjoying it. And, you know, back to this money thing that I was talking about, I kind of got the most difficult topics out of the way early, but now I'm going to come back to explain what I mean a little bit more. You know, I'm not like, you guys, let's all quit using money, and you're not allowed to have the money that you made, and you shouldn't like work hard to and keep what you earn and all this. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. Like, I've always been a super hard worker. Like, I've always been someone who does quality work, and like, I really enjoy it. I really enjoy working for myself. So I've been helping this lady that I live with. I've been helping her move out of her place because I'm moving into a new place. She's selling her place. So I'm like, this is great, man. This is my little niche now. Like, I love fixing stuff up. Like, what I just did was I like sanded lightly, and then I put this kind of waxy material and then a little bit of stain on all the baseboards and doors and trim. And it looks epic. I'm going to make a little montage after this video of like, I did a great job, man. And I think, like, you know, something I regret I said in one of these last videos was like, if you know, I don't care how great your job is, if you weren't getting paid, you wouldn't go. And it's like, we have to find this balance of motivation. Money cannot be our only motivation, obviously, but I'm not putting, like, I think people should go, yeah, do good work, like, be motivated to do good work. So that's what, like, having this independence has kind of made me reel it back a little bit and be like, okay, maybe I was jumping the gun with some of that. Like, I stand by a lot of the things that I said, but I want to clarify, you know, like, I'm an entrepreneur, man. I'm independent now. Like, I'm going to get out there, make my way in the world, like, and become a little more free all the time by doing it. And like, I will be more free if I'm careful with my money and how I spend it, you know? I'm totally capable of doing that. Okay, I had a conversation with a friend recently, and he's a hard worker too. But of course, you know, like most people do, he falls into the political trap, and he goes, I'm a socialist, because he grew up in Europe, and he really, you know, people generally, he was saying, like, looked out for each other more, and you didn't have to have all these expenses. And it's like, well, for one thing, if the government didn't tax us as much as we do, we could keep more of what we earned. We should keep all of what we earn, by the way. He goes, I'm a socialist. And I'm like, no, not in your everyday interactions. I said something like this to him. And I wrote, most people, if they have decent relationships where they're not trying to control each other, act as anarchists. So when I say that I'm not for government, that means I'm for anarchy. People take that word the wrong way. They think it means chaos, and it doesn't. It means without rulers. Maybe I'll try to find this video where Dan Alexander talks about what that word means. And if you think about it, it's like Anne, like without, or Anna, without, right? Or without an arc, like without an arc over you, right? That's what it means, even more simply put, even more basically. That was some weird grammar, Kelly. More basic, right? Most people, if they have decent relationships, like, think about your relationships. The ones that work, you're not trying to control other people. You're not trying to have an arc over other people, you know, over each other. If your relationships are going to work, like, they have to be voluntary. They have to be free, you know, even if you're exchanging money, it's fine. All I want to say about money is we have to be careful about it. Like, especially if we're going to try to have any kind of in-person, you know, community, which I think is what we're going to have to go towards eventually. Again, I'm not saying all at once, but like, we already do this already. We're so networked and we don't even know it. Like, I had a great conversation with this friend, and he's thinking about like kind of starting up his own business, and he's telling me about all these connections that he has. And like, I love talking to people and the way that they describe people in their life. Like, we have such a good, like, just the way we describe the characters in our lives. Like, it's like we're always just telling these stories, you know, like these inaction novels to each other. I mean, it's beautiful, man. Like, and I love that, and we need to have that, and we need to appreciate that about each other. And if we do good work and we think that we deserve a certain amount of money for that, by all means, you know, like, let's go, you know? Okay, so I felt like maybe I was putting down the Trump people. And look, I had a blast actually hanging out with the Trump people before the 2020 election. Like, it was funny because it's in Boulder, which is like a super liberal place. So I was like, I felt very rebellious, right? And of course, like, they were all about America, which is all about freedom, you know? But we got to think a little bit harder about that, guys. Like, we can't just be like, oh, this guy represents freedom, because, like in this book, None Dare Call It Conspiracy, which, by the way, is a really short book, and you guys could all start reading it, you know, it's not hard. He talks about how all roads lead to socialism. Like, they're playing us. Both sides are playing us. You know, if a politician says something that's true about the virtues of freedom or individualism or doing the right thing, like, we should acknowledge that, obviously. But we have to understand that they're all in on it, okay? To my Trump friends, I spent time with you guys and the Christians too. I spent a lot of time with the Christians because you had the most sanity during the pandemic. These were the people who were like, F this, we want freedom, you know, having to do the mask thing and all the BS, right? And I had a blast with them. I used to run around, I'd have an American flag and I would like run in circles, you know, it was great. Like, because we were rallying, really at the end of the day, we were rallying around that point of freedom. We wanted to be free, and we were getting together in order to do it. And the thing that was valuable about that was the act of getting together in person. And same with the Christians. Like, you know, joined the Christians for a while. It's not a big deal. You know, I recognize that, like, while they have a lot of truth in what they're saying, that's just one part of the story. The same way the whole Trump thing is, you know? So I hope you guys see this at some point. The Trumpers and the Christians. Okay, talk about that last video, how I maybe got a little resentful and jumped the gun. I need to reel it back in. Yeah, I kind of talked about this already, but I just feel like I do jump the gun, you know, and I need to reel it back in. Like, I need to just be a little bit more thorough about what I mean, you know, and take a little time to think about it rather than just getting on my soapbox and being like, you guys, this and that. It felt okay, like, to get that stuff off my chest in the Kelly Confessions video, but I feel like maybe I need to focus a little more. It's like, all right, I got it out there. I set the stage, you know, like, I was resentful in that whole situation, you know, with Tyler and I. Like, that's what I was trying to get across. And I am also trying to show people where they played a part in that kind of thing too. That was my point. All of my relationships that haven't worked out, men and women, have been because we became resentful of each other and tried to control each other. That's what I was just saying, right? Like, in that Kelly Confessions video, I talked about, like, how, right, basically, my best friend Tyler, like, I was just, you know, relying on him to come up with my life purpose for me. And and I didn't really have my whole heart in it. And so I knew that I wasn't really thinking for myself and I wasn't really grown up. So of course I got resentful. And that's every time a relationship hasn't worked out, like, men or women, like, in my life, like, it's been for that reason, you know, me getting resentful or the other person getting resentful. And then you try to control each other. I used to listen to Jordan Peterson, like, a lot. And I like a lot of what he has to say because I wrote, he always emphasizes the importance of the individual, which is what the West got right. I think he even says that, like, often. The West, I mean, Western civilization, the United States, and yeah, Western countries, you know, like, they uphold the individual. And that's what these collectivists and these communists are trying to take down. And the Nazis are in that category too, you guys. They were collectivists too. They just had a different name. And then I thought, okay, this is kind of where I'm going with, like, we need to actually just make connections with each other in person. Like, it can't all just be about money, obviously. So, you know, and that's what my friend was expressing when he was talking about this kind of European lifestyle, you know, where people do look out for each other more and stuff. And unfortunately, they tax the shit out of those people, and they are way less free over there. Like, Europe, those parts of the world, that's where they test out all these agendas of control before they bring them over to the States, you know. Yeah. Can we balance that out with helping each other? Example of neighbors. And so, yeah, so like for instance, today, me and this lady who I'm helping, you know, she's paying me to help her on her place, get it ready to move out and stuff, and we needed help moving this big iron bed, and so we got a hold of the neighbor guy, and he came over and helped us, and it's not like he was sitting there like, hey, you better pay me, you know. So if we become more networked and we become more connected, even if there's money involved, it's fine. Maybe I didn't have to go so hard on that, but, like, then we're not going to sell each other down the river, like he talks about in the Gulag Archipelago. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who's the author of that book, he talks about that. You know, how people just didn't even give a shit that their neighbors and people they knew, you know, were being dragged off. So we have to recognize that that's coming back. Like, you know, COVID part 2. Okay. But it's okay. Let's focus on the positive things we can do. Like, it was great. I don't at a certain point, like, I don't mind getting paid less. I actually, when I do work for people like that, like, I do prefer to charge less, because it's like, it's helpful for me, you know. And then, well, maybe the goal for me should be, like, if I just spend less money, then I don't have to work as much, is pretty much it, right? And there's a lot of ways to help each other spend less money. Like, we do this kind of thing all the time. It's like, oh, instead of going to buy a rental, whatever, maybe your friend has one, or you buy a new thing and you gift your old thing to another friend, like, or you exchange, like, you know, walking someone's dog for something else. And like, when you go out for dinner with people and you go, oh, I got you on the next one, you know, you just trade back and forth, like, along the lines of not nitpicking each other. I think if we could develop these kind of relationships where it's like, okay, let's rely less on Amazon. Let's rely less on all these corporate, like, you know, things that are taking over the world, and just do things for each other, you know? Nice. I said I wanted to walk back a little bit on my no money goal. I've actually had decent experiences exchanging money with people for my work, because I do good work. And that's true. So this is interesting, like, along the lines of money. I wanted to keep this short, but I'm going to talk for as long as it takes. I used to work at this place called the Millennium Hotel in Boulder, and I was talking with the lady I live with now, and she was telling me, like, she's in her 60s, I think, like, she used to go party there all the time, and a lot of people have told me about that. And, well, it's going to shit now. Because the higher ups in the company were just holding on to it in order to be able to sell it. Like they didn't really want to improve it, but it's such a shame because all these people tell me in the 70s and stuff, like, and when I worked there, all these people were telling me, like, it was party central. She's like, we used to go there and dance. Like, there used to be celebrities and stuff that would go there. Like, it was a great time, and it obviously just had so much culture and stuff. So, obviously the higher ups in the Millennium Hotel Corporation are more concerned with money. Like, I wrote, the higher ups see dollar signs as more important than the community the hotel served because they were removed from it and they weren't actually a part of it. That's kind of wild if you think about it, because, like, the further removed you are from, well, think about, again, someone like Stalin. Like, he's not down there on the ground, like, dragging someone off to, prison camp. He's just the most ruthless one. And the reason he's able to be the most ruthless one is because he's had to wall himself off because he's become such a monster that regular society won't accept him. It's not like he can work with other people and, like, survive in the world. And well, yeah, that's because, if you really think about it, communism wouldn't have been possible without money, strangely enough. Again, I'm not trying to go down that road of, like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, I'm an anti-capitalist, blah, blah. Like, I think people get really confused about that too. It's like, at the end of the day, these are all just words, and we should just act towards each other properly, right? And I wrote this, like, it's the same grievance people have working for corporations. Like, the higher ups don't really give a shit about the people who do the actual effing work at all. Doesn't that sound like the government to you? Like, if you think about it, we're the ones that build the roads. We're the ones that do all the construction. We're the ones that get our hands dirty. And I wrote, let's get our hands dirty, think for ourselves, and do our own work. Because there's always this argument when I talk about anarchy and not having rulers and not having government. Anarchy just means without rulers, without government, okay? It's just freedom. It's voluntarism. People who argue with me about that say, oh no, the roads. What about the roads? Who would take care of the roads? It's like, we would take care of the roads. But that means we got to do actual work, and you can't buy your way out of actual work. And help our own communities. There are tons of ways to do that, and we will spend less money in the process and build each other up. Yeah, all I'm saying is it's fine. Obviously, we can exchange money, okay? Don't freak out, everybody. I'm stressing building in-person connections because COVID Part 2 is on the way. So just think about all the dynamics that happened during COVID Part 1. Basically, you had people selling each other out. If someone needed to go into a business like a grocery store to get food, and they didn't want to, there goes my neighbor. He's awesome. They had to go get food, and like me and my friends, for instance, and we didn't want to do this. Obviously, I don't want to block my self-expression. I don't want to look like a slave. I don't want to breathe in my own bacteria. I don't want to go along with the cult just because that's what everyone else is doing. But think of how many times you were basically sold out and told to do that, and other people at these employees at these businesses attempted to control you if you didn't want to go along with the herd. And they were like, well, I'm just doing my job. And it's like, that sounds like what the communists and Nazis said. The lower down, like the police and military, let's say. Right? Like, they're just doing their job. And so the more in-person connections we build, the less likely we're going to sell each other out. And this is my own little version of the Gulag Archipelago. Okay? Like, he wrote that because he had to tell everyone what happened, like what he saw. You know, he was morally obligated to. And the guy who wrote that book, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, like, he started out as part of the Russian army, and then after he got back from the war with Germany, they fucking arrested him, you know? So, but we gotta speak up. We gotta speak up, otherwise we're just gonna go quietly into the night, right? COVID was collectivism. Like, if you don't think everyone walking around like this and not having self-expression and doing shit just because they're told to do it by some authority figure, if you don't think that's collectivism, and you don't think that's assimilation, and you don't think that's evil, like, think again, okay? Just think about it, okay? I'm not trying to attack people. I'm just like, think a little bit harder. I have some books for you to read, okay? We can read them together. I'll reread them, you know? Nice. Wrote Gulag Archipelago. If we build real connections, whether or not money is involved, we'll be less likely to sell each other down the river. The phrase selling each other down the river comes from slavery in the South, in the American South. God, sorry guys, I suck at dates. You guys know what I'm talking about. Civil War era slavery, okay? Africans brought over on ships from Africa to America, enslaved to work on the cotton fields and tobacco fields. Everyone knows what I'm talking about, okay? I don't have to belabor the point, but selling down the river meant literally selling African slaves down the Mississippi River. That's where that term comes from, okay? So that's what I mean by selling each other down the river. It's like, you know, that's not the only slavery that ever existed. You know, we're currently enslaved, like, but we should stand up for ourselves, and we should stand up for each other, and we should become strong enough people that we're not going to be someone who's going to sell out our fellow human being, you know, for our own comfort and for our own protection and safety and all this. So this might be over an hour, but I'm just gonna roll with it, guys. I wrote American music. That's my jam. Like, again, I was all worried about seeming like a little communist when I started talking about not using money and all this, but I'm totally not. And the reason I loved hanging out with the Trump people was they were all about freedom. They were all about America, you know? And like, dude, I'm like, that's why I'm so stoked on freedom. It's like, I grew up in such a free place. Like, I grew up in Durango, Colorado, and there's land for us to roam around in and camp in and hike in and just go be free and go be ourselves. Like, that's why I'm all about it. And I've always loved, like, American classic rock. Like, I love Tom Petty, obviously, if you guys couldn't tell from that last video. But, like, they're all about the individual and expression. And, you know, I was jamming out some of those, like John Cougar Mellencamp and like Jackson Browne and who else? Yeah, I love those artists. And so, yeah, it was great because I was jamming out last night, having a blast, like doing my, finishing up my work, you know, and it was like, I was just reflecting on how great it felt to like be working for myself and setting my own schedule and finish the work whenever I want to. And the lady is super grateful and I'm super grateful. So like, I don't know, it's that spirit, right? It's like, we all vibe with that. Like this gal friend of mine called me today and like, she's a super go-getter type of person. So like, I'm trying to find this common ground, you know? The less resentful and entitled everyone is, the more we will respect ourselves and each other, and the less likely we will be to sell each other out. And you know, I think part of the way that I've become less resentful, right, after my falling out with Tyler, like, is that I recognized that I wasn't living my life on my terms. And so, like, I decided I'm going to be as self-sufficient as possible. And like, I've been working towards that for the last couple of years. Like this vehicle I'm sitting in, like it's awesome, dude. It's going to last forever. It's a Toyota 4Runner. And I love, obviously, like private property, like having my stuff, you know, and being like, I'm good. Like, because from that place, then we're not like, and obviously I'm not saying that like private property is the only way to get to that point, but like this friend that called me today, her and I were talking a lot about like self-worth. And if you have self-worth, then you're not resentful. And I'm not saying like people are like, I'm never going to be resentful again, but I am saying I'm a lot more aware of when it comes up again in myself, so that I can slow my roll, check myself, and be like, okay, Kelly, let's figure this out. I love my belongings. I've been working hard on having only the best things so I can become self-sufficient, so I can have the courage to even do this in the first place. I'm going to build out my camper. Like I have all this stuff on my roof rack to, if I need to peace out and go camp or whatever I need to do, like I have everything I need, so that's a great feeling. And I think everyone should have that feeling, and we can help each other with that too. So in a way, I have this like pipe dream that I just want to put out there. Like I have this idea to have a road trip throughout like the US, maybe even Mexico, I don't know. But like to go visit people and to make my way around, like using as little money as possible, and just doing things for people, and not in so much maybe like oh, you gave me this, I'll give you that, but like if I have like a camper, I have a way to survive. Like I have my vehicle, like I could do little side gigs for people and be like, hey, I'll do this for you, fill my gas tank. Like, I mean, think about all these like, these freewheeling kind of like dirtbag hippie people that, in American history, like in the 60s and 70s, right? Like you can do that in this country too, because overall, one of the reasons we're still the most free place is because people do trust each other. Like there is more of a moral code here than in a lot of places. Like that's why you can do that kind of thing. I mean, it's degrading, you guys. Like it's not good, but we can be people who can build trust in each other again, This is interesting, right? Like I wrote, often money shields people from the consequences of their actions. And that's what I was experiencing. Like with Tyler, like we did have this goal and this vision to eventually like build this community of people where we could rely on money less, so we wouldn't have to go have traditional jobs. I mean, he and I were both super hard workers. It's not like we didn't want to work, It's like, so, yeah, like maybe I'll probably talk about this in a moment, but like, yeah, so that was my experience, right? Was like, in the back of my mind, I didn't really want to let go of like I kind of used like the fact that I could just peace out as like, I wasn't honest with Tyler, like, because I knew I could just peace out, because I still had my little stash of money and stuff. And it's not like it's bad to have a stash of money. It's just, that was my experience in my own life. And, that happens obviously for people. Think about the higher ups in these corporations. Like you always get these orders from on high, like I did at the hotel, right? And it's because they don't actually have to do the actual work, because they have a lot of money. Like it's just kind of, and I'm not like, we got to take all their money and redistribute the wealth. I'm like, that's their problem. If they haven't learned how to be people who can go without, like if they really have to, then that's going to be their problem pretty soon. But look, they should earn what they make. They should keep what they make. It doesn't matter. Like we can't be jealous of people like that. That's totally silly, because then you take away focus from your own life and what you're trying to do to improve yourself and to improve the people around you, you know? I don't want to get resentful at you guys. Like, I mean, whoever's watching this, like, and I don't want to let you get away with things either. So some of these next videos coming up, I'm going to talk more about like my experience during COVID and how people, you know, threw me under the bus, me and Tyler under the bus with that whole thing. Meaning they just trashed, like, you know, really, like, friends that I had for years, just all of a sudden, like, well, just a few of them, but didn't really want to have anything to do with me, or were blaming me for not wanting to go along with the cult, instead of just taking responsibility for their own health, you know. So I'm not going to let you guys get away with things either, is all I'm saying. I front-loaded the most difficult topics. I started with the hard stuff, you know, and I think that's a decent strategy. Like, I think I may have overdone it, but I'm trying to kind of repair that right now. So, yeah, right. I talked about like the most emotional topics for people, which are like money, and, you know, I talked about like, we got to stop eating meat, you know, and I do mean those things, like, let's, in technology, we got to step back. Okay. And the more we step back from things like that, like eating meat, you're basically eating death. Okay. I'm not putting you down as a person. Like, and look, I'm not going to berate people if you want to talk to me about any of this. Like, I'm just going to tell you the truth. And yeah, obviously, like, I'm not trying to take anyone's money, and like, I'm one of these, remember I was like, actually, don't give me your money, you know, they're like, I don't need you, I don't need this, blah blah. Like, I do kind of feel, I don't quite like how I phrase that, like, even though it's kind of true. Like, I think that eventually, like, we're gonna have to rely on each other more, and it would be great, and we will definitely be more free the less things we can spend money on. And there's tons of resources out there already in the world. Like, we can repurpose stuff, you know, like I have tons of projects saved up in my life where I'm like, I'm going to make my own XYZ. And it's like, yeah, you need money to do things like that. But it's like, we can also use money towards productive things, you know. Like, the problem with it for me has been a lot of the time that I use it on addictions, you know, and it's fine. It's like, okay, yeah, I get everyone struggles with addictions in one form or another, but we have to acknowledge it and then improve, right? Like, so money has enabled me to do things that aren't good for me. And I have noticed that when I do stop myself from binge spending it on things, like, I do feel better and I do respect myself more. So I'm trying to get into some of these dynamics. I'm not attacking anyone for how they're making their way in the world and surviving, you know, unless you're doing something like not good, you know, for yourself or other people. But along the lines of like repurposing stuff, one of my nicknames of my life has been Trash Panda, which is like my rodent spirit animal is a raccoon, because I'm always like fishing through the trash and like trying to repurpose things, and like, I always have some little project I'm very like, you know. So, like, that's my superpower, dude. So that's what we have to recognize, is like, it's fine. We can, you know, exchange money, fine. Like, but the skills that we have and the people that we are, and, you know, the connections that we have are what's actually important. Like, maybe we could use the money to facilitate those things, you know, but we have to recognize the thing that actually does have value, you know? So that's all I'm saying about that. Yeah, okay. Talk about my call with my friend today, this gal, and it really helped me. Like, and I told her, like, because she's someone that, you know, might not agree with some of these things. And I told her, like, and she called me in the perfect moment, because I was really having a hard time, because I was really worried about the tone of these videos and stuff. And I was worried about like losing my relationships with people because they would think that I'm like attacking them and stuff. And she called in the perfect moment, and she hadn't watched these videos yet, but I told her, like, just go and watch them at some point, you know? And I said, I'm not trying to cut people out. This is what I told her, and I'm just telling you guys too. Like, I'm not trying to cut anyone out of my life, you know? I'm trying to find an in or a common ground. Like, and so along those lines, like, her and I talked about self-worth, and we shared our experiences of lacking self-worth and having these little bouts of depression, like I was having this morning, you know? And I was having this, you know, little, just like, geez, like feeling sad again, man. Like, and she called me, and I was like, all right. Like, and so something we also, you know, found common ground on was, you know, really how to come out of those bouts of depression, and what that kind of takes. And that takes self-reflection, and it takes relying on yourself, you know. It takes overcoming your resentment, for sure, you know, and realizing that you're the only one that can get yourself out of that type of situation. And we talked about helping kids, you know. She'd done some work with this program that would like help kids in the welfare system and stuff. And like, we talked about the importance of that, and like how all kids like need as many loving adults as possible in their lives. Like, that makes sense to me, you know. This is a clicking noise. I drained my battery last night because I sat in my car with the battery on for like 2 hours. So I'm all paranoid about that. Okay, along those lines, I know I said I'm not worried about offending people, but I am wary of becoming too lecturing, resentful, and losing the plot with people. So this is sort of a damage control video, because I realized I ended on that Kelly's confession, which was pretty hardcore. And it's okay, you guys, like, I'm not going to attack anyone if you reach out to me. Like, you know, I'm going to try to really just be as reasonable about this as possible, you know, because I know you aren't going to agree with me about these things. If you disagree with me about something, let's have a conversation so we can find the common ground. Like, if we talk long enough, we're going to find a common ground, you know? And I know that with all of my friends. Like, yeah, I talked about this gal who called me today. She was on our Grand Canyon trip, and she had talked to another friend who was on our Grand Canyon trip. If you watch the previous videos, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's not really required. Just that's what I'm referencing. So she's awesome. Like, and this other girl is awesome. And that's what we vibe on, is like, let's go have an adventure. And during that trip, we had to rely on each other, obviously, and we all had to work hard. But guess what? During the entire trip, we didn't use money. You know, obviously we used money to fund the whole thing, but that's not what made it valuable, right? The most common problem people see when I talk to my younger friends is the whole live to work thing. So it's like, yeah, you gotta pay money to like live in rent a place and get food and shelter, and then you gotta, you know, go to your job to get more money to live to go to your job. And most people recognize this, actually. Like, this friend I talked to the other day who was like, I'm a socialist. It's like, no, you're not. You know, like, I mean, if the socialists and the collectivists had their way, you know, like in 1984, they would just have that on repeat, even more controlled and, you know, desperate than it already is. And that's, if anyone's read 1984, that's basically what happens. Is the main character, he lives in his, you know, apartment building and doesn't really have real true connection and friends, and he just slaves away at his job all day. Let's live to work on ourselves and for each other. You know, I'm not saying let's stop working. I'm like, work is good. Just like, if we do more work on ourselves, that will be better, rather than getting buried in a 9-to-5 and thinking that's all there is to life. I realized how much I could help people, even if I do charge money for the work I do. Often when I do charge people less because I don't feel entitled to a certain amount. Yeah, like, I mean, often when I do work for people, I do charge less because it's like, I don't know, it feels good to like really help people at the end of the day, So yeah, I understand, like, there's money involved in that. I do need to get paid. Like, I need to feed myself and shelter myself and stuff. But like, obviously people feel resentful around money too. But if you're someone who just tries to work on your resentment in general, like, you're not going to feel resentful no matter how much money you have, so. However, there is this sort of pattern that you see in places like Boulder, where I'm at. I wrote, entitlement, people in Boulder, how they think they can just buy their way out of having to treat others with respect. So again, at the Millennium Hotel, like, there's all these pretty wealthy people in Boulder. And again, like, I'm not trying to take people down who have money, but like, there is sometimes a sense of entitlement because people just think like, oh, I have money, you should do what I say, or whatever you're doing isn't good enough, or, like, we kind of lose this respect with each other sometimes, and I've done this to people, like, around money specifically. So like, this guy, one of my bosses at the hotel, like, he'd worked for years in California. He was this older guy. He had tons of experience in hotels, and he worked in California for like 20 years. And one time at the hotel, like, we were having problems. We were having this event and people weren't paying to like park at it. And they were just kind of running roughshod over this place that we'd worked really hard on to make look nice, because of this overall kind of entitlement people have in Boulder because they have money, And I don't think that's the only reason people are entitled here, but, it's so bizarre, right? Because also you get those type of people who, there's a lot of liberal people here, so they also feel entitled to like go whine to Big Daddy government to make rules to make other people do what they want them to do. So I guess I'd rather have a wealthy conservative person, because then at least they're more along the mindset of like, well, you should keep what you earn and all this, like, but it's basically the same dynamic, like, and he's telling me, like, this guy who'd worked in California, he's like, Kelly, the level of entitlement in this place, like, is even worse than California. I was like, we're over there working our butts off, like, doing all this hard work, and all these people just think, and often you see this kind of too, sometimes with people with a lot of money, they'll be kind of cheap. Because they're trying to grip onto it, It's like, dude, just pay the people, man. And I've experienced both. I've experienced very generous people with a lot of money, It's all about attitude, right? I'm on my third notepad. Okay, I want to clarify, in that first video when I was talking about self-improvement and like how people out in Colorado are doing all kinds of stuff, self-improvement. And like, I do self-improvement stuff every day. This morning, it's always Saturday morning because I have time, in the morning, but I had to deal with some emotional stuff, and that counts as self-improvement. Like, you got to go through that stuff, right? So I did, with this phone call with my friend and everything. And I exercise every day pretty much, like, because I care about myself, I care about my body. I want to have a good level of energy. I want to respect myself and also just like appreciate myself for what I can do with my body, And so that goes along the lines of like, cool. I like these connections. Like, always moving forward, like always evolving, not staying stuck in one way of doing things, like not devolving, right? And that's, my website, right? Keep moving forward. And, along the point of communism and collectivism again, I watched, because I talked about the Borg in the first video I made, like, And I'd never watched any Star Trek, so I was like, I should probably watch this if I'm going to reference it. But I watched a clip, which I'll link, about the Borg, the encounter with the Borg Queen in Star Trek. And she's this, disembodied head that comes down, and the guy that she's, has got trapped from the good guy, one of the good guys that she has trapped in her clutches, in this video clip that I'm going to share. Star Trek, right? He goes, like, he asks her, like, who are you? And she answers, I am the Borg. And he's like, the Borg is, but that doesn't make sense. That's contradictory, because the Borg is a collective consciousness, like a hive mind, right? Like a bee colony or something, or an ant colony. And she goes, I am the beginning and the end. I can't read what I wrote, but I'm the beginning and the end. Like, that's terrifying, right? It's a good scene. Like, you're going to be disturbed. And this is what the collectivists are going for. Like, they're basically trying to go on a road to hell with all of us. Like, here's another comparison. And that's what Satanism is, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a minute. But so if anyone has watched the series Stranger Things, which if you haven't, I would highly recommend it. It's a great piece of American culture. It's 80s, like, it's the kids are these heroes in the movie, right? And they fight off the evil underworld monster, and they work together, right? And these best friends, right? And it's excellent. So anyway, the monster in Stranger Things, like, I think it's like the third season this starts happening. The monster is of course, like, this sort of hive mind creature where there are all these individual little mini monsters, but then there's a hive mind that's controlling all of them. And they're basically destroying everything in their path. What they're trying to do is they're trying to bring the underworld up. It's called the Upside Down in the series, but it's basically the underworld. It's basically like hell. They're trying to bring hell to earth. So what the Satanists are trying to do. And yeah, so I wish I'd prepared a little better. I don't have an image really to show you guys. Okay, I'm gonna try to put a clip in here of what like an image to show and represent what Satanism is. I want to call it an inverted pentagrams. I may be totally butchering this, but let me just try. So, like, if you want to represent sovereignty, like a sovereign person, you can think of the image of, like, just a human being, right? We're shaped like a star, basically. It's a 5-pointed star. Satanism is an inverted 5-pointed star. What a pentagram, or an inverted pentagram, like, that's what it represents. So, like, you think of an upright 5-pointed star, you've got, let's use me. It's like you got the head and the arms and the legs, okay? 5 points. And this should be at the top, because you're constantly trying to improve your own connection to source and to God and creation, and tune in, from here, and then put those actions out into the world of where you fit in the universe and how you're supposed to serve the world with your particular individual, soul and body and heart and mind, right? And so the way the Satanists represent what they're trying to do is they take that image and they invert it. So it's a goat head, if you've ever seen that before. And so what that does is, like, flips the whole thing upside down. So puts, our connection up here to source, to our higher self, totally flips it to now being subverted into the underworld, basically, like our base desires. And, I would say the main emotions driving that desire to do that in one's own life, and what the collectivists are trying to do when they're trying to assimilate everyone and make them the same, and turn them into the Borg and turn them into this Stranger Things monster, is they're trying to serve their individual egos, and they're all kind of clawing for, I would say, status within their networks, right? But basically, as individuals, that's what they're doing. They're basically serving that evil force that's trying to bring the hell on earth. It's trying to bring the underworld into the upper world. So sovereignty, like the 5-pointed star, right, represents an individual aligned with their higher self, full self-respect and self-worth in service to truth. And this is what I'm trying to do, is like, how can I best serve the truth so that other people can come online and figure out what's really going on here too, and we can join together. This gets into these books that I'm going to share and read little excerpts from, and I hope to get into them in more detail, to prove that I actually read them. But anyway, all these books talk about this in one way or another. The communists were Satanists. The Nazis were Satanists. Of course, the most powerful people in the world, as far as having the most control over society, of course they're organized, right? Why wouldn't they be? And yeah, it's like, just think about that in terms of the reference I was just using for Stranger Things. It's like, why wouldn't they be? Like, why do we have these depictions of evil, collectives and characters in movies, like the monster in Stranger Things, or like the Borg in Star Trek, right? Like, because it's a representing something that's real, like that's going on in the world. Otherwise, why would we be making depictions of it in movies? And so in Stranger Things, the monster, it's assimilating all of its victims to fulfill its own egoic and evil agenda, to have complete control. That whole show represents the upside down or underworld coming to conquer, I guess I'm going to call it the upper world. And I wrote, the kids save the day. That's why I'm always emphasizing kids. Like, because, well, think about it this way too. That's who the Satanists are going after. Like, at a certain point, we all get old enough that if they haven't mind controlled us already, like, then they're done with us. Like, we're disposable. But then the next generation is who they have to control in order to fulfill their evil agenda. So that's why we need to pay attention to the kids, because we really need to intervene on their behalf and, start to deprogram them however we can from this evil stuff that they're learning, and they're learning it in public school. Sorry to say, you guys, if anyone's involved in that, but, we need to pay attention to them. Like, if the Satanists are giving this much attention to them, like, in an evil way, like, then we need to pay attention to them in a good way. Like, we need to start becoming aware of that as adults. Like, and we got to do that physically in the world by involving ourselves in kids' lives. Like, and I don't think it's that hard, And so I'm going to link these two. two people that I would recommend people listening to, who talk about, what this satanic agenda is for children in the world. Like, one is Jay Parker, who experienced it firsthand because he grew up in an Illuminati family and suffered satanic ritual abuse at the hands of his parents and other, adults in their community. And, I know I keep saying if you're going to listen to Mark Passio, start at 1, but his interview with Mark Passio interviews Jay Parker about this topic, and it's episode 17, and it's one of the first times that Jay is actually like speaking out about this, about what happened to him. And he's an extremely courageous person. And if that does not move you emotionally to start to like think about wanting to take care of children, like, you gotta just listen to it. So I'll link it. So episode 17. Otherwise, listen to Mark Passio in order, And then there's Jamie J, and she has done a ton of research on this. She's super articulate and well-spoken, and she's actually a counselor for people who've gone through satanic ritual abuse and other, trauma. So she's very well educated about this topic. So if we pay more attention to kids, we'll start to pay attention to our own inner child that knows the difference between right and wrong, which is basically don't intentionally hurt others, Think about being a kid. Like, if we spend more time with kids, we're going to see things from their perspective. And think about when you were a kid, right? And you would see another kid being bullied. And like, having that moral compass as a kid, we're much closer to it, right? When we're younger like that, because you just experience things, I think, at a more intense level, and so don't intentionally hurt others, right? That's what we're more connected to as children, is understanding that. And don't just look on while others are being bullied and hurt, That's why I love talking about Stranger Things, because they show all these, topics of these characters and these kids. So the kids are the target of the Satanists. Let's win back their minds and hearts by giving them our attention instead. So like, my mom and I, we watched Stranger Things together, and it was really great, and she loved it. And I wrote, neither of my parents were absent. They paid attention to me and my betterment. And so in a series like Stranger Things, or anything where you have like the kids that battle the evil monster, like, you always have this character of like the absent-minded parents that are just kind of like la-di-da, like going through their life, not really giving a shit, and like, we can't be like that, So my parents weren't like that, even though I know I talked about like some of the difficulties I've had with my dad and stuff, but like, he paid attention to me. He was telling me about this stuff. He was telling me about the indoctrination of the school system, and he would get me out of school, and we would go have adventures, And so I'm very grateful for that. As much as I feel that I don't have to involve anyone in my life if I don't want to, speaking of my dad, right? Like, but I can still be grateful for the good attention that he gave to me, so. If you're someone who recognizes the importance of helping children, let's brainstorm how we can do that together outside of school to teach them about truth. So we can either help each other get them out of school, more often, or just band together when we're at home, involve them in our gatherings as adults, and we don't have to like obviously beat them over the head with all this, conspiracy stuff, but like, let's just tell them the truth about what's truly valuable, which is them. Let's help them develop their self-worth, right? Like, if you're an adult who respects yourself and who recognizes the importance, like this girl I was talking to today, my friend, like, she's like, yeah, I would take this kid rock climbing, like we would see movies, like, that is huge, man. Even something as simple as that, you know? Because then they see that, like, oh, like, I'm valuable, you know? So let's get into the books. Oh my glob. I'm going to try to keep this under an hour and 30 minutes. All right. I was talking about, let me read from None Dare Call It Conspiracy, right? Hopefully I can get this through this first page pretty quick. Okay, look, don't confuse me with facts. He's talking about that all of these so-called conspiracy theories are not theories, they're facts, you know, of these people conspiring together to control the rest of humanity. He says, most of us have had the experience, either as parents or youngsters, of trying to discover the hidden picture within another picture in a children's magazine. Usually you are shown a landscape with trees, bushes, flowers, and other bits of nature. The caption reads something like this: concealed somewhere in this picture is a donkey pulling a cart with a boy in it. Can you find them? Try as you might, usually you could not find the hidden picture until you turned to a page farther back in the magazine, which would reveal how cleverly the artist had hidden it from us. If we study the landscape, we realize that the whole picture was painted in such a way as to conceal the real picture within. And once we see the real picture, it stands out like the proverbial painful digit. We believe the picture painters of the mass media are artfully creating landscapes for us, which deliberately hide the real picture. In this book, we will show you how to discover the hidden picture in the landscapes presented to us daily through newspapers, radio, and television. Once you can see through the camouflage, you will see the donkey, the cart, and the boy who have been there all along. Millions of Americans are concerned and frustrated over mishappenings in our nation. When did he write this book? Sorry. Okay. In the introduction, it says 1971. I think this was written in the 70s sometime. Millions of Americans are concerned and frustrated over mishappenings in our nation. They feel that something is wrong. Sound familiar? Drastically wrong. But because of the picture painters, they can't quite put their fingers on it. Maybe you are one of those persons. Something is bugging you, but you aren't sure what. We keep electing new presidents who seemingly promise faithfully to halt the worldwide communist advance, put the blocks to extravagant government spending, douse the fires of inflation, put the economy on an even keel, reverse the trend which is turning the country into a moral sewer, and toss the criminals into the Huskow, I've never heard that word, where they belong. Yet, despite high hopes and glittering campaign promises, these problems continue to worsen no matter who is in office. Each new administration, whether it be Republican or Democrat, continues the same basic policies of the previous administration, which it had so thoroughly denounced during the election campaign. It is considered poor form to mention this, but it is true nonetheless. Is there a plausible reason to explain why this happens? We are not supposed to think so. We are supposed to think it is all an accidental and coincidental, and that therefore there is nothing we can do about it. FDR once said, in politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. That's FDR who said that, right? He was in a good position to know. We believe that many of the major world events that are shaping our destinies occur because somebody or somebodies have planned them that way. If we were merely dealing with the law of averages, half of the events affecting our nation's well-being should be good for America. If we were dealing with mere incompetence, our leaders should occasionally make a mistake in our favor. We shall attempt to prove that we are not really dealing with coincidence or stupidity, but with planning and brilliance. This small book deals with that planning and brilliance and how it has shaped the foreign and domestic policies of the last 6 administrations. We hope it will explain matters which have, up to now, seemed inexplicable, that it will bring into sharp focus images which have been obscured by the landscape painters of the mass media. So that should give you a good little taste of what that book is about. Again, it's a really short book, so None Dare Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen. And it is only LOL, the page numbers aren't in here. It's not that big, guys, I swear. Look, it's really skinny book, okay? Like 100 pages. So now I'm going to read from, I was talking about evil, right? And you know, I keep saying there's a difference between right and wrong. And if you read this book, you're going to start to understand better what I mean about that. I printed this out, you know, you could get it for really cheap, or you could go print it out. By Jeremy Locke. Sorry, The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke. So he writes, Chapter 1, Freedom. The definition of freedom is the infinite value of the human being. The definition of evil is the destruction of freedom. Everything that is evil teaches people that they have limited value. Truth is always simple. All people recognize truth because all people are intelligent beings. It is the nature of evil to create artificially complex ideas. It does this to hide or obfuscate the freedom it destroys. If you remove the complexities and fears from your life, you will find a plain and beautiful truth. This truth is the nature of your worth. I was talking about self-worth, right? Value of man. To understand freedom is to understand the value of a person. Everything that evil wants is to disguise and destroy your value. All authority is created by evil men to disguise your worth. To understand your own worth is to understand the nature of liberty. Evil. The crucial key for understanding our world is to understand the nature of evil. Evil challenges the value of people by denying them the opportunity to make their own choices, by denying them the chance to grow strong in learning and understanding. And so, like, I read this whole book and I underlined it. So, oh gosh, Collectivism. I need to read that part. Culture teaches the worthiness of the common good employed by force. It teaches that it is acceptable to issue law to advance a collective ideal. Whether to pay for a project or control behavior, compulsion is frequently labeled public interest. Oh, COVID. Does that sound familiar? Public health. It's elevating the collective, or the use of force and control, you know, by the evildoers in the world who are disguised as people who know better than us and who have our best interest at heart. And their agendas are, you know, forced through. But they say, we have to force these because it's for your own good. It's for the public interest. It's for public health. Never mind your freedom. Never mind your true value. You have to basically stamp out your own true value and self-worth and individuality to assimilate and become a part of the collective and part of the Borg. Because whatever our agenda is way more valuable than you as a human being. And obviously, those people who are doing all of that and orchestrating it, they hate themselves, you know. So that's why they're doing it. Because they're evil, you know. They don't recognize their own self-worth. They want to be gods, you know. They don't want to live by God's law. They want to be gods. Okay, let me read from this. This is another very short book. These are all like 100 pages or less. Matrix of Power, Secrets of World Control, Jordan Maxwell. Epic book. He has a great sense of humor. Okay, so he basically is saying a very similar thing, or the same thing as what Gary Allen is saying. At one time or another, we've all questioned as to whether all we see and are experiencing in our world has some sort of rational plan behind it, because we understand now that both the Republican and Democratic parties in America are basically run by the same people. The same money finances both sides. We now know through the work of many historians who have spent their lives working on research that both sides of world conflicts have always been financed by the same people. And as I've said many times before, this seems to be the method to the madness going on in the world. We know, of course, that we cannot depend on the truthfulness of our leaders. Our leaders are misleaders. There is a science they are following. They have their own agenda, and it does not include you. So again, like, this is an excellent book. And he has all these great images, like Statue of Liberty, and underlined pretty much the whole thing. Okay. Maybe I'll just read it, the first. I'm just going to read, I'm trying to keep this short, so I want to get to 1984. I'm going to read the back of the Gulag Archipelago. And this is a huge book, which is why I haven't really gotten into it, but I will. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn, right? He writes, "For years I have, with reluctant heart, withheld from publication this already completed book. My obligation to those still living outweighed my obligation to the dead. But now that state security has seized the book anyway, I have no alternative but to publish it immediately." And he writes, he basically wrote this in prison from memory. Like, it's incredible. So, I mean, look at this image, right? Like, suffering, That's communism coming to a town near you. But we can stop, right? We can stop it. We can be like those brave kids in Stranger Things, and find the child in our hearts that knows that this is wrong, and we band together with our friends, with our buddies, Dang, there's so many good. Okay, I'll just read this part. I was going to read a different part, but he's talking about where they have this. Oh no, come on, Kelly, just go to the part you were going to read. If I can find it. Yes. Okay, this is written from the perspective of the main character, Winston, who basically wakes up to the Matrix, The voice from the telescreen paused. A trumpet call, clear and beautiful, floated into the stagnant air. The voice continued raspingly. "Attention! Your attention, please! A newsflash has this moment arrived from the Malabar front. Our forces in South India have won a glorious victory. I am authorized to say that the action we are now reporting may well bring the war with measurable distance of its end. Here is the news flash." Bad news coming, thought Winston, and sure enough, following on a gory description of the annihilation of a Eurasian army with stupendous figures of killed and prisoners, came the announcement that, as from next week, the chocolate ration would be reduced from 30 grams to 20. Winston belched again. The gin was wearing off, leaving a deflated feeling. The telescreen, perhaps to celebrate the victory, perhaps to drown the memory of the lost chocolate, crashed into "Oceana, 'tis for thee." You were supposed to stand to attention. However, in his present position, he was invisible. "Oceana, 'tis for thee" gave way to lighter music. Winston walked over to the window, keeping his back to the telescreen. The day was still cold and clear. Somewhere far away, a rocket bomb exploded with a dull, reverberating roar. About 20 or 30 of them a week were falling on London at present. Down in the street, the wind flapped the torn poster to and fro, and the word "Ingsoc" fitfully appeared and vanished. Ingsoc, the sacred principle of Ingsoc, I-N-G-S-O-C. Newspeak, doublethink, the mutability of the past. He felt as though he were wandering in the forests of the sea bottom, lost in a monstrous world where he himself was the monster. He was alone. The past was dead. The future was unimaginable. What certainty had he that a single human creature now living was on his side? And that way of knowing that the dominion of the party would not endure forever. This is what they're going for, right? One world government. I know this phrase gets old maybe, but if people haven't heard Klaus Schwab say, "You'll own nothing and you'll be happy," right? Compulsory happiness from the force of the collective, We're gonna abuse you and you're gonna like it, basically, is what they're saying. So it's basically what Winston is describing. And what way of knowing that the dominion of the party would not endure forever? Like an answer, the 3 slogans on the white face of the Ministry of Truth came back at him. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. So, look at that shit, dude. Just, like, that's what Satanism is. And, again, I hope to just flesh this out a little better as I go. But that's the basic idea. War is peace, right? You have that inversion going, you know, okay, we're going to elevate war and death and suffering above, you know, truth and love and beauty, basically. And ignorance is strength, right? Which it's actually not. You know, if you're arguing to someone from a place of ignorance, you're not strong, you know. And what is the last one? Oh, sorry. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. Freedom is slavery, right? There's that inversion again. You know. So, I think I've made my point for tonight. Yes, this is what I wanted to do at the end. So, get this rolling. Oh, we're going no headphones. All right. This is my jam. Tom Petty. Oh no. Never mind, guys. My battery died again. How did that happen? That's hilarious. I was gonna play American Girl, but I gotta take care of my property, it seems. So I was gonna jump out. This is the special edition where you have to like open the door like that. Just imagine that American Girl by Tom Petty is playing, and it's gonna be great. So, like, let me show you my ride. It looks like this. I got all my camping stuff up there, and just kind of my go shit. And yeah, I love this car. It's a truck, guys. It's a truck. Anyway, her name is Stella. So that's my property, you know. And I'm gonna cruise all over the place with it. Anyway, let me get back in here. And cool. An hour and 31 minutes. I want to end on 32 because I really like that number. What else? I love you guys. Thanks for listening to all of this. I hope I made it entertaining. My point was to do some damage control from the last one and just be less resentful and show you guys, like, hey, I'm improving myself, like, I'm dealing with my emotions, I'm going out in the world and I'm making things better, you know. So, like, you're all capable of doing that too, and you're all doing a lot of that stuff, but please don't just, like, turn a blind eye and don't just go along with the Borg. Okay. All right, love you guys. Mwah. Thank you. See you on the other side. So YouTube wouldn't let me use this song, It's American Girl by Tom Petty, because of the copyright. So I thought if I played it faintly enough and sang to it, maybe they wouldn't catch me. And I'm going to talk about why YouTube is a bunch of communists and Nazis later. But for now, I hope you enjoy the song, and I'm going to dedicate this to my mom, because her and I used to sing to Tom Petty all the time. And when I wasn't an angsty teenager, I would sing with her. So I sang with her later in life, and we had a good time. Love you, Mama. She was an American girl, raised on promises. She couldn't help thinking that there was a little more to life somewhere else. After all, it was a great big world with lots of places to run to. Yeah, and if she had to die trying, she had one who promised she was gonna keep. Oh yeah, alright. Take it easy, baby. Make it last all night. She was an American girl. Well, it was kinda cold that night. She stood alone over the balcony, Yet she could hear the cars roll by at 0441, like waves crashing out on the beach. And for one desperate moment there, he clipped back in her memory.